Brown, an Oklahoma prisoner serving a life sentence. I've been invited to speak here in this format discussing juvenile life, second chances for deepening reform, and most importantly, to emphasize the voice. So check me out. For the past decade, there's been cries throughout the land of the U.S. regarding the impact of difficulty among family households and friends of men and women whom serve life sentences, who repeatedly are denied parole and other forms of relief, simply because of the optics of what it might look like politically. This issue is unfairly matched to any agenda, goal, or mission involving the spirit of second chance, and this has got to stop. So it's time that we should begin taking notice of the men and women seeking elective duties in our states and engage debatably about real issues that hit home. And vote with conviction what you believe is your America, what you believe your state should aspire to become, and what you believe should be. Most importantly, contact the source of the problem: district attorneys, judges, local representatives, governors, etc. These are people that serve your interests in the public venue. You, being the audience here, you guys are the real voice. And by the Constitution, you have a right to speak. And for the Constitution, you have endowed rights that compel action. And as it's written, quote unquote, we be the people. Change is a strong impact, and it begins with the people. So I'm going to go in depth to address real issues of concern here. In the center of the country resides a red state-controlled Republican Party, the state of Oklahoma. Under its current leadership, Governor Kevin Stitt has emphasized the belief of second chances, but party affiliation, such as conservative groups in the political arena between Oklahoma lawmakers and the District Attorneys Association, have strongly opposed the vision of equal fairness, substituting a more mutated approach by stoking fear tactics to victim right platforms and distorting public view categorically, addressing a threatening and disgust picture for violent offender crimes. So what does this mean? It means people like me and people alike who have served 20, 25, 30 plus years in prison are simply rejected a meaningful and fair opportunity to obtain release for purposes of parole. Elected officials from the courts to the parole board agencies follow the drumbeat of the party's vision of a better Oklahoma. And while the spirit of second chance exists, it's most opposed to violent offenses. Now, with ongoing concerns with the Oklahoma Department of Corrections regarding prison overcrowding for over a decade, the District Attorneys Association and lawmakers have believed that releasing nonviolent offenders is the remedy to the problem. It has proved wrong. Criminal justice reform in Oklahoma needs a fair and equal process to remedy, and that is the original Truth in Sentencing Act of 1998 in Oklahoma. This act incorporated a sentencing metrics across the board. It even defined a life sentence with a term of years between 18 to 60 years that would provide a prisoner to discharge a life sentence. But unfortunately, in 1999, lawmakers gutted the act and ran away with enforcing the truth in sentencing to only mean that courts were still allowed to sentence a prisoner outrageously, but requiring him or her to serve 85% of that sentence before being eligible for good time credits or parole. And life sentence remained just that, a natural life. The Oklahoma correctional system is not in a healthy state to sustain normal operation, as it undergoes modified changes to the growing threat of COVID-19. What the public won't hear are the official numbers of offenders infected with COVID-19 in private prisons in Oklahoma at the Lawton Correctional Facility and the Davis Correctional Facility. They both each hold at a population of more than 2,200 plus offenders. It's some real accelerating issues of the virus that at best is kept aside from state facility data, and that glimpse alone is why private prisons for Oklahoma are dangerous. The numbers of concerning issues aren't transparent enough to Oklahoma citizens. You seemingly have to cut through red tape by some means to understand it all, and of course, there is panic among officials behind the scenes, and it's obvious that officials are strategizing some plan that incorporates ways to release inmates. So I voice, what about us? What about children, adolescent lifers? I've been incarcerated for the past 21 years, serving a sentence of life imprisonment with the possibility of parole for the conviction of assault and battery with a deadly weapon and or commonly referred to as shooting with intent to kill. This story of circumstances spawned in June of 1999 in a small but historic Oklahoma town named I was young and ignorant, lacking much in the development of character. I never robbed a convenience store, but that thug life appeal to an adolescent teen caught up in all that stuff was a terrible influencing net that captured my attention. Scared to go into the store, a vehicle pulled in on the other side of the building, and I chose instead to confront the easy approach. Attempting to rob this man at gunpoint, the rest of the story just didn't make any sense. Pointing the firearm through a passenger side window, the man looked and leaped out of the vehicle, running into the entrance of the store, so I ran the opposite direction. But in doing so, with the firearm still held outwardly in the position it was, as held through the vehicle window, the firearm went off. All this within a matter of seconds. My ignorant and irresponsible actions shot and injured a man. Now, later in the following months, the victim testified that I never asked for money, but that I only mumbled unintelligible speech. That would definitely explain my impairedness of judgment, but by the grace of God, that man survived that horrific encounter. That was a violent offense that deserved the accountability for punishment. But was throwing a teenage life away the right call? Let's take a look at this and find out. During court proceedings of this case in Logan County District Court, State of Oklahoma, case number CF-1999-174, a motion was argued to keep this matter in juvenile proceedings. A certification study was prepared by juvenile authorities, and this is what the authorities concluded. It would take literally 2.5 years for myself to complete a treatment plan in the juvenile system, and if I failed to complete the plan of rehabilitation services that it offered, that the law would allow me to be placed in the Oklahoma Department of Corrections to no more than 10 years. The judge ruled that the matter should remain in the youthful offender system, but somehow forced a procedural mishap by state prosecutors where they sought the imposition of an adult sentence. We instantly appealed the decision. While the matter was pending on appeal, the state rushed the trial proceeding within a period of 2 weeks. I was convicted by jurors recommending a life sentence. I was 17 years of age and instantly removed from a juvenile detention center into an adult population of the Logan County Jail that same day of the verdict. Formal sentencing was yet to be rendered until a month later. 4 days later, I escaped through a ventilation system in the course and found a vehicle with the keys inside for transportation purposes. I was apprehended 3 days later, so I was charged with escape from a penal institution and larceny of a motor vehicle and sentenced to 5 years each, consecutive from one another. I was quickly sent to an Oklahoma prison for what would be for the next 10.5 years of my life at the Oklahoma State Reformatory in Granite, Oklahoma, from July 2000 to February of 2011. Should we debate on whether to throw a juvenile's life away? In juvenile reform in 2010, the United States Supreme Court in Graham versus Florida held that the Constitution prohibits life without parole sentences for juveniles who committed non-homicide crimes. In 2012, another landmark decision in Miller versus Alabama addressing the ban on life without parole sentences for homicide offenses, and in addition, prior to sentencing a juvenile to life, courts must take into account of certain youth-attendant factors. 4 more years later, in 2016, SCOTUS ruled yet again in Montgomery versus Louisiana that Miller versus Alabama decision must have retroactivity for collateral review. So, what does that mean? It means in 2016, I sought collateral review, which is a post-conviction relief, in the district court. Subsequently, I was denied relief. The state argued that because my sentence label is not life without parole, that such relief is not warranted, emphasizing that I'm eligible for parole consideration. I discovered months later in my 2017 parole docket that the district attorney quietly protested my release, and again in April and September of 2020 with the district attorney's narrative that expressed, quote unquote, the state adamantly opposes any release of the defendant, quote unquote, the defendant is a threat to society and should never be considered for any early release, quote unquote, he should be required to serve his full life sentence. Wow, that's pretty ugly. How does a 16-year-old, 21 years later, who committed a non-homicide crime fit the profile to never be released? Maybe, just maybe, if I was violent and aggressive in behavior during this period of incarceration, messing up. But let's look at that. For the past 21 years, I've only had 3 minor infractions. 1, possession of a contraband in 2005, 5 for cutting off my long hair and keeping it overnight in my cell. I was later informed that because I had a life sentence and I was young, it's uncommon for my type to have a spotless record. So I pled guilty to the conduct to avoid segregation. Number 2. In 2006, I was written up for battery. I sent $50 to another inmate's trust fund account so I could draw down more than $25 limit of commissary that I was placed on for 5 years due to escape conviction. And lastly, number 3, in 2010, I was in possession of a cell phone. Pretty self-explanatory there. But for the past 10 years, I've maintained clear conduct, no assaults, no serious or violent conducts ever. Taking every available program, GED, and a half semester of college courses until funding was cut. Became a warden's orderly, a very difficult and scrutinizing job assignment to obtain as an inmate, working in administration offices beyond security layers. Tapped as an inmate to facilitate programs placing emphasis on character, faith, and leadership curriculum, all of which is documented in my institutional record. More recently, I was awarded meritorious achievements for protecting human lives and preventing destruction of property during a gas explosion incident in August of 2019 at the Lubbock Correctional Facility. After sustaining burn injuries from a fireball explosion and concussion from the blast, I managed to find myself when staff and offenders were in shock and injured. I helped facilitate an evacuation while dashing flames with a fire extinguisher and quickly finding my way to the gas line with a tool nearby to cut off the gas line to prevent a secondary explosion that would have proven fatal and more destructive. I was then immediately rushed to a local hospital. Currently, and for the past 3 years, I operate as the facility's troubleshoot plumber and computer clerk, but oftentimes designated as the on-call emergency detail. I assist maintenance operations with gas boilers, fire sprinkler systems, and the inner waterworks of the facility. I'm entrusted with a variety of tools and responsibilities not available to typical offenders. But in summary, I applied myself to become who I am today, the education, the vocation, and trade. You just can't be no dummy, irresponsible in this league of applications, period. And it's earned respectively. So I ask, what threat of behavior, conduct, or action of mine today as a 37-year-old man presents a threat to society that warrants the enforcement of a statement that I never released? Perhaps if I committed some unforgiven atrocity, but as an adolescent teen in this case, at 16 years of age, people change. Children eventually age and grow out of ignorant behaviors and become more than what people would have thought in a previous time. This exactly is the requisite of demonstrated maturity and rehabilitation. How does it situate well with family and friends? The truth is, and I emphasize again, the truth is it's difficult, and it's difficult and uneasy. What's the problem with allowing second chances to prisoners of violent offenses who exceed the expectations of punishment to offer themselves to a better cause or grow in age in ways that define so much more than who they were when the crime was committed? Last year, in the spring of 2019, offender Noah Hill, convicted of homicide at age 16 in a crime that happened in 1993, was serving a life without parole sentence. In regards to juvenile reform in Supreme Court of the United States, Montgomery versus Louisiana, Oklahoma County Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Hinsbinger vacated Noah Hill's conviction based on Supreme Court ruling of Montgomery that prohibits life without parole sentences to offenders capable of change. They modified his life without parole sentence to life with all but the first 45 years. During Noah Hill's incarceration, he was a model inmate with exemplary conduct. And because of that, it allowed his sentence of life suspended with all but the first 45 years to become time served. To learn more about this article, you can Google an Oklahoma media outlet called The Frontier, who published this article. But that's just it. District attorneys have the power of discretion. They are the gatekeepers of the spirit of second chance. Fortunately for Noah Hill, a collateral review challenging his sentence helped obtain that opportunity of relief. But what about us who aren't in a position to file for collateral review? Under Oklahoma law, there are no provisions that allow prisoners of violent offenses to petition a review by the sentencing court after serving 20, 30 plus years incarceration to be considered a suspension of sentence. But it definitely could change if the voice is extended even further to state government. The one exception in law that presents a minute percentage of violent offense categories is the Oklahoma parole process. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Oklahoma parole procedure, well, you're in for a shock because it lacks substantial meaning to its purpose of procedural intent. And whatever you see in the news, like the O.J. Simpson parole hearing presented on live TV a few years ago, Oklahoma parole hearings are nothing alike. And in my opinion, the state should vote to either dissolve the agency and do away with the system, or vote to revamp its structural integrity with real substantive procedures. The current procedure presents a two-stage process, the same process for commutation hearings as well. The first stage is commonly referred to as the jacket review, a process where no offender is involved in. Board members simply convene in a meeting to vote by majority vote to pass an offender to stage 2, the personal appearance. For an example, if you have a parole hearing date for November and the board votes past to stage 2, you'll have to wait till January to appear for a personal appearance docket. The transparency in this process is troubling in how the board reaches a decision to grant or deny an offender. Then you have a second stage personal appearance process. An offender at his or her facility will be appointed to a secure room to join the board by via Zoom network. Typically, the hearing lasts between 5 to 10 minutes at length, and an attorney by Zoom network can speak in your defense. In Oklahoma, violent offenders considered for parole or commutation is on average of about 11 violent offenders among a docket of nearly 300 non-violent and violent that will be selected for a personal appearance each month. Only about 20 in the whole year will be recommended parole or commutation to the governor. Yes, you heard very clear, recommended to the governor. So if you were granted a parole or a commutation of sentence by the board, you will have to wait 2 to 4 months pending the governor's signature to approve. And it's a very long, drawn-out, unnecessary process. Now, that just sounds like way too many procedural hurdles if you ask me. But that's Oklahoma's procedure. No wonder why prisons in Oklahoma are overcrowded and men and women are incarcerated longer at length than what they have to be. I've been considered for parole in 2014, denied a jacket review, commutation of sentence in 2015, granted a personal appearance, but subsequently denied with no reason. Parole again in 2017 and denied at a jacket review. Recently, on April 14, 2020, I was granted a commutation of sentence, but the board chose to avoid the life sentence, emphasizing that it was a matter for parole purposes. The board recommended to commute my 2 5-year sentences to run concurrently with my life sentence as controlled. I don't think it's the best of quality of video, but here is a glimpse into a personal appearance of my commutation hearing. You're in front of the board today. Did I swear you in? Yes, you did. Okay, there you go. You're in front of the board today on a case from Logan County where you were charged with shooting with intent to kill and you got a life sentence back in 2000. Is that right? Correct. And you have 2 other cases running wild. You have an escape from the penal institution, 5 years, Logan County, and a larceny of a motor vehicle, 5 years, Logan County. So you have the life sentence and then 2 5-year consecutive sentences. And those are those running wild with each other? Yes, sir. Okay. And so you're requesting commutation on all of those sentences? Yes, sir. Okay. Can you tell the board the reason that you believe that the governor should commute those sentences? The past 21 years. I'm sorry, hang on just a minute. I forgot. You have a lawyer that's going to do that for you. So here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to let Ms. Hampton tell us the legal reason for the commutation, my bad, and then I'll come back to you to let you finish up or add anything to what she says, okay? Okay. That was my bad. Go ahead, Ms. Hampton.
And like my other case, there has not been a change in the law as far as punishment for this crime. But as I continue to say, I don't believe a life sentence is appropriate for a juvenile, non-homicide person. So I believe that his sentence is excessive. The fact that they ran the other cases consecutive makes it that much worse. He is not the same kid that he was when he was 16. His record proves it. And I just hope that you all will give him a meaningful opportunity to explain his life and how he feels about it now.
Right.
As opposed to when he was important to this board, and if it goes forward, it will be important to the governor as well. So we appreciate that you've had no misconducts for quite some time. That's very important. Let's fast forward a little bit. Tell us about what your plans are when you do get out. Where are you going to go, and how are you going to support yourself? First, I'd like to address this board with making this board do here today first. I have a reentry plan, and that reentry plan consists of available upon release working with Express in Norman, Oklahoma. It's a $12 an hour job starting off pay as a maintenance technician. And I intend to stay with my mother, Dana Jenkins, who lives in Norman, Oklahoma, in a short distance to this hotel service. I have a great families and friends support system to back me up.
Yup.
And I believe that I can be very instrumental in this process to return back to society.
Yup. Yup.
Good. Mr. Brown? So you want to add anything else? I want to reflect that upon this reentry, not only do I want to obtain this job, but I also want to pursue my degree as a paralegal degree. My attorneys offered an employment to an extension service for research that I can be an asset to her extension service. Another thing I want to point out is that for the past 21 years, whether I've been in programs or obtaining my GED at the age of 21 in 2003, I have maintained a job to this date. I think what I'm trying to point out is that I see myself giving myself back in whatever way possible, whether it be being a role model here or helping others. I'm not thinking about myself or being selfish. And in light of the offense at age 16, I made the most stupidest decision in my life, in my youth, and that was shooting Haskell Scroggins and causing injury. And those actions are inexcusable. And I am terribly sorry and ashamed that I brought upon the citizens of Oklahoma to where we are today. But it has not been a day that I have not forgot about that, and I regret those events as they are today. Like, I'm a totally different person than who I was at the age of 16. I'm 37 years old. And I just ask that this board will consider voting yes in a sentence commutation.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very well said. Made a good presentation. I think we have the information that we need to make our decision. So
man, free him, man.
You have to be excused while the board votes, but you can check back with your case manager in a little while to see how the vote went today. Okay? Thank you. Okay. Good luck to you, sir. Keep working hard. We're clear. Call vote on Keith L. Brown.
Robert Gilliland?
No.
What?
Adam Luck?
I also don't find a compelling legal basis for commutation of the shooting with intent to kill. However, I do feel that he does have a compelling case for parole, and see that his consecutive cases do feel excessive if he were to be paroled in July. So I would recommend running the cases concurrently, moving the two consecutive cases to concurrent, and that's my recommendation.
Kelly Doyle?
I agree to run concurrent.
Larry Morris?
I agree with Mr. Luck to run the sentences concurrently, no reduction in time.
Come
Alan
on.
McCall?
I'm going to say no on CF 1999-174. That's the shooting with intent to kill. No. And then on CF 2000-123, counts 1 and 2, I recommend that those run concurrently with each other and concurrently with CF 1999-174.
Commutation has been recommended to commute to run cases concurrently only.
On August 17, 2020, Governor Kevin Stitt signed approving this commutation of sentence. Now we have a whole new video clip obtained by the parole board of my latest parole hearing September 14, 2020 on my jacket review. Subsequently denied, of course. But check it out to understand the first stage process of jacket review. Now keep in mind, 10 years clear conduct, meritorious achievements, and a strong candidate deserving of a second chance. And lastly, listen to the board.
Number 40, Keith Brown. Alan McCall.
Keith Brown. Okay. This is another one where I have a note. It says they're waiting on the governor to approve. We ran everything concurrently. And so, I mean, and again, I don't have all the updates. I haven't looked at them yet, but we apparently at some point recommended everything to run concurrently. Is the governor signed off on that?
Yes, sir. Give me just a second for it to pull up. He was commuted. He was granted commutation on August 24th to run the sentences concurrently.
Okay, so what we're voting on then is the shooting with intent to kill, larceny of a motor vehicle, and escape from penal institution, all running concurrently, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm a no, and the reason is A.
Robert Gilliland.
No, A.
Larry Morris.
No, A.
Kelly Doyle.
Yes.
Adam Luck.
Yes.
Denied.
When we peer into the form of transparency, it's easily understood why such transparency of the parole board agency is or has become vocally concerning. Question: why wouldn't board members know with certainty whether the governor, in fact, signed commutation? It reveals that board members do not arrive at the meeting with having performed its duty to be fair and thorough on a case-by-case basis. It's merely a wing-through process filled with exhausting tolerance. It's unfortunate that board members are not voted by the people of Oklahoma, but they are appointed by the governor. The video is almost amounting an embarrassment of conduct and procedure, but this is Oklahoma's parole process. In conclusion, juvenile life for non-homicide crimes of offenders in prison 20 years later is still disturbing and a form of unusual punishment, as most adult offenders who commit more serious crimes will not even spend as much time as one who commits an offense as a juvenile like myself has served. That's problematic, troubling, and sensitive and should be examined and remedied. Secondly, the need for sentencing reform that provides equality to all offenders the opportunity to petition a sentencing court for review for suspension of sentence after a period of incarceration based on demonstrated maturity and rehabilitation factors is something ideal to present to local representatives or in a state question for vote. Thirdly, the voice. A respected man named Brian Stevens and a respected woman named Kim Taylor Thompson with the Equal Justice Initiative have helped foster change the way children have been punished for serious crimes. They both voiced the concern on a national platform for the country at state level to make adequate changes to criminal justice reform issues. I believe this venue herein can help foster a much growing audience to render a voice of action, a voice like the Equal Justice Initiative. So, if you desire to help me, here's how you can help. Contact Logan County District Attorney, Miss Laura A. Thomas of Guthrie, Oklahoma, regarding Keith L. Brown, Logan County, case number CF-1999-174, or District Judge Philip Corley, and ask questions. How can we amend the District Attorney's narrative to provide a meaningful and fair opportunity for Keith Brown's upcoming parole in 2023? Or how can Keith Brown petition a review for suspension of sentence? And if we must look further, please contact Oklahoma senators and representatives to plead a sentencing reform with Keith Brown's case as a model to spring from. And if nothing else, it's people like you who hear us. Voices matter. And as a voice to the Oklahoma prisoners forgotten or mistreated who matter, and my thought of names who have exceeded expectations, risen above ignorance from youth while under a life sentence after 18, 20 plus years, you should hear their stories too if you ever seek the chance. Rashad Thomas, passionate for knowledge, a man of deepening faith. Mary Fox, a prisoner of perseverance, a woman of generosity, love, and truth. Wayne Williams, the definition of reform, a man of hope and peacekeeping. And Tony D. Humdy, the defining theme in maturity, a man driven to survive the oppression of juvenile life. We matter.